So a special NDPS court has on Wednesday, 20th October, rejected the bail application filed by Aryan Khan, the son of Bollywood megastar Shah Rukh Khan, in connection with the Narcotics Control Bureau's big sort of drugs cruise case. Now, as you know, on the 2nd of October, the NCB raided a cruise ship which was about to leave Mumbai because they believed there was going to be a lot of drugs sold and consumed on that. They arrested Aryan Khan along with his friend Arbaz Merchant, another woman called Munmun Dhamecha. And subsequently, they've gone on to arrest a number of drug sellers and peddlers and smugglers, including foreign nationals as well, who they all say are sort of all part of one big case. Now, Aryan Khan, Arbaz Merchant, Munmun Dhamecha, they moved the courts for bail. They've been in judicial custody since 8th October. And their bail applications have been decided at this point by the court. The other accused, the sort of smugglers and the sellers, their bail applications have not yet been decided. But for these three, the NDPS court has said no bail even for them. This is a slightly strange order and it's a slightly surprising order. And there's going to be now several issues which are going to be taken up in the Bombay High Court, because as we know now, Aryan Khan has filed an appeal against this decision of the NDPS court. He's challenged it, and he's asking the Bombay High Court to grant him bail. Now, why is this strange? Why is it surprising? For that, we've got to look at the NDPS Act and sort of how it deals, the way this act actually works. Now, it creates almost separate regimes for what are called small quantities of drugs, intermediate quantities of drugs, and commercial quantities of drugs. When we're dealing with commercial quantities, that's where things get really serious, right? Because you're not just talking about someone taking drugs for recreational purposes, you're talking about the drug trade as a whole, about drug trafficking. So, there's two ways in which you see the seriousness come in. There's the extremely high sentences. You see, the moment you're dealing with commercial quantities of drugs, whether it's possession, sale, manufacture, purchase, immediately there, the punishments, the maximum punishments rise quite high. You're 10 years, 20 years in jail. Then the second kind of things is you see that where someone's involved with drug trafficking, which comes in again with these large commercial quantities and commercial sales of drugs, you're then, there is a separate special provision called Section 27A, which deals with financing and facilitating drug trafficking operations. And once that's invoked, actually, it's almost impossible to get bail, because the court can only grant you bail if they think that you're not guilty of the offense. Now, this is why it is a bit strange and surprising that Aryan Khan, Arbaz Merchant, and Munmun Dhamecha have not been given bail, because there is, as of now, very little to tie them to any commercial quantity of drugs. In terms of recovery, no drugs were recovered from Aryan Khan's possession. 6 grams of charas were recovered from Arbaz Merchant, and 5 grams of charas were recovered from Munmun Dhamecha. Now, this all falls within the threshold for small quantities of charas or cannabis, which means that if you're looking at possession of that, maximum 1 year in jail. If you're looking at consumption of charas, it's maximum 6 months. So, given that only small quantities have been picked up from these guys or are even connected, if you're looking at Aryan Khan's case, strange that you're not granting them bail. Now, the NCB is trying to argue that, look, there's a bigger conspiracy here. The drug smugglers and sellers have commercial quantities, and we think there's a connection between them and even Aryan Khan and Arbaz Merchant and Munmun Dhamecha. Now, they've not specified what exactly this connection is. They've said there's a conspiracy, we need time to unravel this conspiracy, but they're insisting that that's there. And they're using that to try and argue that these guys should not be granted bail. And it's interesting because, they've not invoked any of the commercial quantity provisions. They've not invoked Section 27A, which we told you about, in terms of drug trafficking. That's not been, they've not booked Aryan Khan or Arbaz Merchant or Munmun Dhamecha under that, very stringent provision. Now, if we look at what they're really, as we said, they're being accused of consumption of charas, possession of a small quantity of charas. If we look at purely that, not getting bail doesn't seem to make a lot of sense, because, when you're dealing with that low threshold of punishment, generally, in fact, those kind of offenses are what are called bailable offenses, where you get bail as a matter of right. Now, there's a certain amount of dispute over whether or not, when it comes to these smaller offenses under the NDPS Act, are they bailable? But even if they're not bailable, which is something which is going to be argued in the Bombay High Court going forward, even if they are non-bailable, that doesn't mean the court can't grant bail. The court can still grant bail as long as they feel that, the person is not going to go and abscond, they're not going to threaten witnesses, they're not going to tamper with evidence. And there's very little to suggest that these three accused are actually going to do that. So, if we look at the main thing which they can be sort of hit with, which is possession and consumption of charas, they should have got bail at this stage itself. In fact, for Aryan Khan, since there's been no recovery of drugs from him, no matter what you're saying, okay, maybe there's some WhatsApp chats, maybe there's something else which he said in his statement which indicated that he'd done drugs before. None of that indicates that, this is an offense where bail has to be denied, because you've got to, as you said, look at those other factors. And none of those really seem to be in place here. Now, there is, of course, the question, okay, but what if they're part of a conspiracy involving commercial quantities of drugs? But the point is, where really is the material to kind of indicate that? The NCB read out one WhatsApp chat from these guys in court, and all it talks about is saying that we're going to have a blast on this cruise. That's not an indication of being involved with commercial quantity. Even if you've contacted a drug seller and bought drugs from them, that doesn't tie you to what that drug seller is up to. Now, this was something we saw last year in the Riya Chakraborty case. Now, she also spent a long time. She spent around a month in jail. The NCB kept opposing her bail. The NDPS court rejected her bail applications. But finally, the Bombay High Court said, look, there's nothing really which ties her to these broader questions of commercial quantities or drug trafficking. And that was in a case where, by the way, Section 27 capital A had actually been invoked against her. That hasn't even been done here in this case, which is why it's very, very strange that the court has rejected bail. So obviously now at the High Court, these are the issues which are going to have to be looked at. Is there really grounds to deny bail? Shouldn't they be allowed bail if you put strict conditions which don't allow them to do any of these dangerous things, which don't allow them to run away, which don't allow them to tamper with the evidence, which they can't because, the NCB has all of it. And they're not, underworld people or someone who's going to go and with violence threaten any of the witnesses. So that's going to be the sort of key line of argument in the High Court, that there's no reason to deny them bail even if you want to proceed with this case. And given what the Bombay High Court did last year for Riya Chakraborty, even for her brother Shoaib, who was initially denied bail by the High Court but later was granted bail, if we look at the way the High Court dealt with that case last year, it's very likely that they will grant bail in this case going forward, which then raises some serious questions. First, about the NCB here insisting that they want these people in custody for a conspiracy which they've not really done anything to establish so far, and for the lower court itself for denying bail at this stage, when, as we know, for a long time the Supreme Court has said that it should be bail, not jail. That's your rule. So some very important things which are going to come up in the High Court. Stay tuned with the Quint for all those updates, and we'll be telling you exactly what's going to come out of this case as it goes forward.
We are truthful, unafraid and independent because of you. Now you can help our reporting from the ground. Go to thequint.com, click Become a Member tab, choose a plan and pay, because the truth is worth it.